This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A. Everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you as I love to do every weekday over the airwaves of ESPN Radio, 250 plus markets across the United States of America, plus ESPN Radio on Sirius XM, Channel 80. Number to call up, as always, is 888-SAY-ESPN. My apologies for not being here yesterday. Mandatory meeting by the bosses was called, and that is why I was not in attendance. But I am back, ready to roll. And obviously, the lead story, the lead item, is James Harden capturing the league MVP honors. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to a man that averaged 30 points a game and led the Houston Rockets to the best record in basketball with a 65-17 record. Got to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Chris Paul doesn't get hurt. Houston might be champions. Nevertheless, you have people who believe LeBron James should have got the MVP award. You got others who believe Anthony Davis should have gotten an award. Anthony Davis' time will come. I consider Anthony Davis to be one of the elite basketball players, top 3, top 4 in the world. I think that in about 2 years, he will be recognized as the best player in the world. He's that legitimate. He's that big time. Consider the fact that Anthony Davis is a walk-in 28-12 with no problems whatsoever. Consider that. Consider the fact that he's 6'10" and can guard 4 different positions. His time is going to come. There is no question about that. But here's what I want to say to all of you. Here's what I want to say to all of you right now. I got a real problem with how tough it is for people to understand why LeBron James didn't deserve the award this year. I have a real tough time with that. I want to let the record show that I am fully aware of the kind of year that LeBron James has had. 27.5 points, 9.1 assists, 8.6 rebounds, played in all 82 games during the regular season. I am fully aware of the greatness of LeBron James. I am fully aware of the fact that he's the greatest player in the world. A matter of fact, maybe he's so great that it might be worth pointing out that instead of calling it the most valuable player, it should be the most outstanding player. Because we all know that no one has more value to their team than LeBron James has to his. Okay, fair enough. But it really boggles my mind how some of you out there just don't get it. Just don't get it. And if this was First Take, I'd put up the breaking news tag talking about how LeBron James, great father, great husband, great philanthropist, very charitable, the I Promise Initiative, the LeBron James Family Foundation, the list goes on. I'd bring up all of that. Because God knows we know I have to have a qualifier. Because we know that we can't say anything remotely critical about LeBron James. How dare us? How absolutely positively dare us? What is wrong with us? Why would we think about doing such a thing? What the hell is wrong with us? But I got real problems with some of you out there. I got real problems with some of you out there in terms of your thinking about the MVP. LeBron James did not have Kyrie Irving. Whose fault was that? J.R. Smith and others ultimately went off the rails once Dwayne Wade arrived as a teammate of LeBron's in Cleveland. Whose fault was that? Isaiah Thomas and Crowder and others not necessarily fitting into the grand scheme of things with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Whose fault was that? LeBron James' fingerprints written all over that. Kyrie Irving wanted to be away from him. Dwayne Wade with his teammate and brothers who always felt like close brothers to LeBron James felt differently after Dwayne Wade arrived. I'm not trying to paint LeBron James as a villain here because he's not. What I'm trying to say is the roller coaster ride that the Cleveland Cavaliers went on that ultimately led to them going 50-32. LeBron James' fingerprints were all over that. That's an MVP season to y'all? That's what it is? I'm sorry. That doesn't work with me. Not in the face of a guy that's averaging 30, that was a model of consistency throughout the season, that's been a runner-up the last couple of years, whose season was pretty seamless, and whose team epitomized everything an MVP season is supposed to be about. It is a regular season award. This award is not for the postseason. This is a regular season award, and I'll get to that damn award ceremony in a minute. But this is a regular season award. If it's a regular season award, what's the problem? You trying to tell me over the course of 82 games? You trying to tell me when winning and losing is supposed to be paramount? When you're talking about an MVP, you're not just talking about statistics. You're talking about leadership. I'm not questioning LeBron's leadership overall. I'm saying this season wasn't his best. There's LeBron James fingerprints all over the place that compromised what happened with Cleveland during the regular season. It's a regular season award. Period. And there is no doubt that James Harden deserved it. In 2015, when he lost out to Steph Curry for league MVP honors, they talked about Steph Curry having the best record, having a better team. Now, James Harden has the better record and the better team than Cleveland, but we want to throw that criteria out of the way for LeBron James. My boy Champ that calls into the show all the time constantly laments the fact that we got a bunch of apologists out there who desperately want LeBron James to win or something. He's always the victim. And you know something? I'm starting to believe it. Because no matter how many times you could sit up there 99% of the time and compliment LeBron James, and the second you say something remotely critical, you hating. I had some young lady who was clearly very, very young, wet behind the ears, breath smelling like Similac, met me along with a cast of folks at a dinner last night in Hartford, Connecticut, and before she had a chance to say, hello, Mr. Smith, she said, why are you hating on LeBron James? I mean, you've got to be kidding me. So you can have a roller coaster ride. You can get a star and an elite player to want to leave you. You could bring on a future Hall of Famer who you won 2 titles with and went to 4 NBA finals with, who's maybe your best friend outside of your crew. And his arrival provokes you to alienate everybody else around you. All of that leads to a roller coaster ride of extreme proportions during a regular season. And that's your MVP? That's what an MVP is to you? Come on, y'all. Come on. James Harden is the MVP. James Harden is the MVP this season because he had a sensational season, because his team had a sensational season, and because it was devoid of drama and stress along the way. This is the Stephen A. Smith radio show. I come to work every day with my producers ready, willing, and able to work with me and for me. If I alienate them, treat them like trash, ultimately create so much friction within the show, but the show still ends up doing well. Oh, that's enough? That's an MVP? That's an MVP performance? My talents, my abilities, and skill sets might be enough to overcome it, but it ain't an MVP performance. I really don't understand how it's so damn hard for people to comprehend. LeBron James had everything to do with the friction and the tumult that existed in Cleveland all year long during the regular season. His performance against Indiana, his performance against Toronto, his performance against Boston, notwithstanding. And those were postseason games. It was not a regular season award. I'm sorry, it was not a postseason award. It was a regular season award. And it was not an MVP caliber season for him. Because it's not just about your numbers. It's not just about getting yours. It's about leading. And he could have done a better job of that. It doesn't mean he won't do it next year. It doesn't mean he hasn't done it before. It just means this particular season, no, he did not do that. And that is why he doesn't get my MVP vote. It belongs to James Harden, and I'm proud that folks saw it that way and gave him the award he so richly deserved. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. That's what it's about. And by the way, as Jalen Rose pointed out this morning on the show Get Up, there's a level of consistency here. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar won 6 NBA League MVP awards. Michael Jordan and Bill Russell, I believe, won 5. And LeBron James and Wilt Chamberlain won 4. You trying to tell me Jordan didn't deserve more than 5? You're trying to tell me Bill Russell didn't deserve more than 5? You're trying to tell me Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a 19-time All-Star, the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, the only individual in the history of the sport with one unstoppable move, didn't deserve more than 6? Because seasons determine the award, not your talents and abilities. It's the kind of season you have. It's not just about your numbers. And by the way, let me get to another point. And I want to preface my comment by saying congratulations to TNT for doing the outstanding job it always does. Ernie Johnson, Kenny Smith, Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, absolutely hilarious. We know what they mean to the sport of the NBA. We know that they work in concert with the NBA. And from a production standpoint, phenomenal job. But it's important that I say this to y'all. It's important that I say this to y'all about this NBA award show. It needs to go. It really, really does. Because I got news for you. When the MVP has to wait until after the season, a Defensive Player of the Year award after the season, a Rookie of the Year, and all of this other stuff, did it not just appear incredibly anticlimactic to all of you? You trying to tell me you play 41 home games in front of your crowd, particularly if you make the postseason, and you win the award, and you get to celebrate with a few people you care about, and most of whom you don't, and the cheers pale in comparison to 19+ thousand screaming fans that have been supporting you all season long, and you celebrating inside of a building or a hangar with a couple of thousand people after 19,000 plus people have been coming out to see you 41 nights a year to cheer you on and inspire you to be as great as you were, and you don't get to hoist that trophy in front of them? I mean, come on. Last night, arguably the biggest news coming out of the NBA awards is the fact that Bill Russell gave Charles Barkley the middle finger on national television. Playfully so, I might add. That's about it. And we had some intrigue because we wanted to see who the MVP was going to be. Outside of that, come on. The NBA and the Players Association need to stop. LeBron James wasn't there, hasn't been there. Kevin Durant won that Community Service Award. He wasn't in attendance. 2 greatest players in the world, not in attendance. Probably because they felt it was boring as hell. And I'm not talking about the televised event. I know from a production standpoint and from a television standpoint, it was fine. But you trying to tell me that James Harden would not have rather been in shorts on the court at midcourt with the NBA commissioner speaking to 19+ thousand screaming fans where you could barely hear him as he introduces James Harden as the league MVP and hands him that trophy to hoist above his shoulders in front of those screaming fans at the Toyota Center. You trying to tell me that's not preferred compared to what you saw on TV last night? Can we stop it, please? Can we stop it? See, it's moments like this when you know certain people just never played. Because I got news for you. You can ask players, these multi-million-dollar athletes. Ask them about the hair standing up on their skin and the goosebumps they feel throughout their body when they step on a court for big moments in front of a packed house of fans. Ask them what that's like. And then ask them to compare that to what we saw last night. It's not even in the same stratosphere. It's not even in the same ballpark. But that's what people want to do. And if you're going to have an award show, why not just do the damn thing earlier? As soon as the regular season ends or something. Why not delay the playoffs for a week? So everybody that can be there can descend upon whatever respective city we're talking about here so they can have the event and celebrate it that way. Me personally, I can do without it. Because I think that a player should hoist that trophy in front of their fans. I really believe that. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. By the way, the other thing that I wanted to get into was Oscar Robertson, NBA Hall of Famer, one of the greatest 50 players in NBA history. Last night at the awards, received the 2018 Lifetime Achievement Award. Dikembe Mutombo received an award for his community service as well. And what he's done for his homeland back in the Congo, building a hospital in his mother's name. Dikembe Mutombo is one of the most beautiful human beings you'll ever meet in your life. It was incredibly touching to see him and examples and footage of him giving back to his homeland. It's an incredibly touching situation. I can't say enough about him. I've known Dikembe Mutombo for almost 20 years. And no matter what you see from him in terms of his humanitarian efforts and whatever, it's nothing compared to the kind of human being he is. He is a special, special man. I love Dikembe Mutombo. But I also love Oscar Robertson dearly. And when you think about the fight that Oscar Robertson was willing to take on and what he had to take on, you just can't say enough. You really, really can't. Oscar Robertson spoke last night. He also felt the need to touch on issues about athletes getting involved in social issues. Listen to what the great Big O, Oscar Robertson, had to say about that.
The only thing that really bothers me is that where are the white athletes when this was happening? I mean, it's just not a black athlete problem when you see this injustice in the world. I mean, it's all around you, and just because LeBron steps out, I'm glad he does. I hope some other players, because this is what they believe. It's not. I mean, what do you want players to do? You know, shut up and dribble? You know, I think it's time for them to say what they want to say about life, say about politics and about things in the street and whatnot, about education, which a lot of the players are doing. They're donating their monies back into different causes and whatnot. But it seems that what we have today is a system where you don't want players to say anything at all, because years ago they didn't say anything because they couldn't say anything. But now I hope the whites and the blacks to get together, even with the football. I mean, what do you think is going to happen when the union gets involved with the owners? You think it's going to be settled real easily? No, it's not. It's going to be nothing but a total mess.
That was the great Oscar Robertson, Hall of Fame Oscar Robertson, speaking out about the need for athletes, and particularly white athletes, getting more involved in social activism. I'm not sure I agree on every single point that Oscar Robertson made. But I will tell you this much. If anybody has a right to say it, and if anybody is going to have good points on this issues, no matter what side of it you fall on, it's going to be the big O, Oscar Robertson. That much I can promise you. And I will explain why in a minute.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I feel like a whole new person.
Disclaimer, you will not become a whole new person. This is impossible. You might be able to join a gym or diet program, buy a new wardrobe, get hair implants, but your DNA and physical form will remain the same. Geico waives any and all liability if you attempt to become a new person, except a cyborg. If you choose to become a half-human, half-cybernetic organism with lasers for eyes, the Geico legal team would be cool with that, because, quote, laser eyes are pretty sweet. Pew, 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 end quote.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to read an article. Steve Ashburner. He's a writer out of Minneapolis. Does a damn good job covering the NBA, has done so for years. I want to read a few graphs of something that he wrote back in February 13th, 2014. As obviously he was leading in the All-Star Weekend for 2014. Just want to read y'all a few things because it's relatable to what Oscar Robertson touched on last night. From a peripheral standpoint, just stay with me, okay? It was when the All-Star game was in New Orleans. Steve Ashburner writes, quote, in the months, weeks, and days leading up to the 1964 All-Star game, the NBA players and their still budding union had been blown off more than once by the franchise owners in the league's hierarchy. Officers and player reps of the National Basketball Players Association would travel to a Board of Governors meeting, encouraged that they would have an audience with the bosses, only to be left cooling their heels outside the room. Until the evening of January 14th, 1964, when the owners of the NBA's 9 teams were the ones on the wrong side of the door, banging and pleading to get in. Quote, the owners kept putting us off and putting us off, said Tommy Heinsohn, the Boston Celtics Hall of Fame player, coach, and broadcaster, who was the National Basketball Players Association president at the time, owing mostly to his off-season job in the insurance field. Finally, he said, we decided we're not going to play the All-Star game. Boom. The NBA won't exactly be celebrating the 50th anniversary of this pivotal moment in its history at All-Star Weekend in the Big Easy. But without it, the league might look nothing at all like it does now, with players and owners building it into one of the most popular sports options on the planet. Like the union itself, founded in 1954 by Celtics guard Bob Cousy, the issues of 1964 had been on the table for most of a decade. The players were trying to institute a pension plan to cover some portion of their retirement years. There were concerns about working conditions, such as meal money, full-time trainers, home and on the road for each team, and schedule considerations. For example, no Sunday matinees after Saturday night games. There also was the sheer recognition of the NBA Players Association as the collective bargaining voice of NBA players, with Larry Fleischer as its executive director. Quote, they tell us they were going to do all these things, Oscar Robertson said this week, and then they changed their minds. And there you have it. Why did I just read that to you? Because we're talking about 1964. That's how long Oscar Robertson has been involved with player protest, social activism, fighting with sports leagues on behalf of player rights, free agency and beyond. If it wasn't for the positions that Oscar Robertson took in fighting the league, to this day, these players might not be able to be as mobile as they are. See, there were pioneers, ladies and gentlemen. There were people who came before LeBron James, even came before Michael Jordan, even came before Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Hell, Think about what happened. Bob Cousy started the union in 1954. So when Oscar Robertson feels the need in 2018, more than 50 years later, when he feels the need to address social activism, and he stands up and he says he wishes more white folks will get involved in social activism on behalf of some of these players, because these problems that we allude to ain't just a black problem, ain't just a Hispanic problem. He's also pointing out something else. Real change in our nation came about when white Americans stood up with black brothers and sisters and said, this is wrong, and we have to do something about it. That's why he brought up the NFL players. And I applaud Oscar Robertson for that position, because I understand he has a heightened level of sensitivity that's far more educated and in-depth than I could ever hope to be. I wasn't even born yet when Oscar Robertson was fighting. So I understand. But as I said this morning on First Take, my television show on ESPN, every weekday morning from 10 a.m. to noon with Max Kellerman and Molly Kiram, it's also incumbent upon particularly the black athletes to have a plan. See, when you have a plan and it's put in place, and it's just about the matter of executing that plan, because there's an end game at the end of the proverbial or figurative tunnel, then hoping and asking for somebody to get involved is not only cool and decent and right, it's also plausible. Because the goal in mind is in your sights. But when you're asking people to make sacrifices, inevitably they're going to ask for what? And you have to have an answer to that question. And when the answer doesn't suffice, you got a problem. Colin Kaepernick taking a knee was never against the National Football League. It was against society, law enforcement issues with minority communities, civil rights, racial oppression, etc. When you got even a Michael Bennett coming out, who he, along with his brother, are known for contributing to causes in desolate and disenfranchised communities throughout this country. And even Michael Bennett comes out and he says, I don't know if taking a knee is the right way to go at this point. Got to pay attention to that. Because ultimately, what is it going to accomplish? Other than foment and escalate the ire of owners who cut your checks. Because their position is, you're not protesting us. It has nothing to do with us. Why do we have to pay for this? When that happens, why exactly are you asking white folks to get involved? I'm not saying they shouldn't get involved. I'm saying that's a legitimate question that they may ask that needs to have a definitive answer. Do you or do you not have it? That's the point. You got to have an answer. You got to have a plan. And oh, by the way, you got to also understand that every white person out there that may indeed support Donald Trump doesn't make them racist or xenophobic or anything like that. There's plenty of folks out there from white communities and beyond that supported a presidential candidate because he addressed their lone individual needs. You have some people that are fixated on being pro-life. You have others that are fixated on national security issues. You have others who are fixated on the border. You have others who are fixated on the economy. They don't know what the hell is going on. They know what their issue is and what they care about. So in other words, in order to get the help of communities, you can't demagogue or demonize everyone who feels differently than you. In order to bring people in, not only do you have to invite them, you have to make the environment that you're inviting them into invitable. Not rife with alienization. I appreciate and implore what Oscar Robertson said. I just wanted to point out that it's not as simple as he proclaimed it to be. Might be simple for somebody like him. He's a born warrior who also didn't have much to lose because of the circumstances with which he had to deal with. Players in today's generation making 8 and 9 figure salaries, or they got a hell of a lot to lose in their minds. And they know it. Far more complicated than it used to be. Just thought I'd point that out. Your calls are more in a minute with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
To the phones we go. Let's go to Matt, New York. You're live with Stephen A. Talk to me.
Hey, Stephen A., how you doing?
How are you? Thanks for calling.
So every year around this time, we talk about the NBA draft and one-and-dones and what are we going to do about it. And I'm always thinking to myself, nobody seems to be familiar with how it works in college hockey because I think they have a pretty good system. Do you know how it works?
Go ahead. Tell me.
So basically the way it works is the NHL will draft their negotiating rights. They don't draft their contracts in the same way that they do in the other leagues. So they don't have to have them sign it right away. So they're able to still maintain their amateur status until they actually sign the contract. So they can get drafted at 18 and then play in college, freshman, sophomore, junior years, and not have to worry about it.
So in other words, what you're saying is the team has the rights to the players. So the player has to negotiate with the team. But in the same breath, the player can still participate in collegiate activity, et cetera, et cetera. It's just that when they decide to go pro, that's the team that has their right, and then they're free to negotiate the contract at that time with the team that has their rights.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, the way it works is the team has an open line of communication with the player, and they say, we think you're ready now, so you can leave, after whenever you want. And so you have players that leave, freshman, junior, sophomore years, whenever. And even more interesting, actually, is if you go through all 4 years and you graduate, then you don't have to go to the team that drafted you. You can go wherever. That's how the Rangers ended up getting Jimmy Vesey.
I think there's so much money involved in football and basketball and baseball. The level of control matters. And I think that as a result, you're not going to see teams and owners willing to forfeit that privilege. And you're not going to see players being able to negotiate that because they already have a problem with the level of freedom the players already have with LeBron James and others looking to go and join and formulate super teams and what have you. I think that's a problem. But I get your point, Matt, and it's a valid one. Thanks for the call, buddy. Tommy in L.A., you're live with Stephen A. What's up?
Stephen A.
Yes, sir.
Question. You've been talking about since the middle of the season, the middle of the regular season, that James Harden is, without a doubt, the MVP, and that is definitely not my call and argument here. My call and statement is about LeBron. To be the guy that everybody calls the best in the world right now in this sport, how big is this milestone for LeBron that he is now missing due to the fact that he has beyond carried the Cavaliers, beyond...
I don't understand. I don't understand your question. What's your question?
How big is this milestone that LeBron is missing? How big is it that the MVP is not on his shelf right now?
It's not a big deal. It really, really isn't. Not whatsoever. Because there's nothing that questions his greatness as a player. We're just saying that James Harden had a better season. An overall more productive season.
Correct. And James Harden also was the ignition starter piece to all those players on his roster. Gordon, Capella, all those people. He did his job as a star, as an all-star, to keep them lit, to get that fire.
Well, then why the hell did you call up here and ask me why big of a deal is it that LeBron James doesn't have the mantle on his, or the trophy on his mantle?
James do that on his roster?
What?
Did LeBron James bring the fire to his roster?
Some people say he did. I disagree with that in comparison to James Harden. Period.
I think we have the angry fans at.
All right. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. You're whining. You're whining and you're rambling and you're not making points. Ladies and gentlemen, when you call up to the Stephen A. Smith Show, you have to make points. It's not your show. It's my sport. It's my show. I get to ramble. You don't. Be very, very clear and concise in your thoughts. And make sure our listeners understand exactly where the hell you're coming from. Otherwise, I will cut you off. That's the way it goes on the Stephen A. Smith Show. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. Hour number 2 up next. More basketball, more football, even T.I. in the house. Stay tuned.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Stephen A. Smith Show, here with you on ESPN Radio. Here, as I love to be every weekday over the airways of ESPN Radio, 250-plus markets across the United States of America, plus ESPN Radio on Sirius XM, Channel 80. Number to call up, as always, is 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. Before I get back to the phones, to end hour number 1, I alluded to T.I., hip-hop artist T.I., speaking about the NFL. And apparently, you know, he's from Atlanta, big-time Atlanta Falcons fan. Super Bowl's in Atlanta this coming year, as you all well know. And in the event, and as a result, rather, T.I. has gone on the record and made news by announcing to the world that he fully intends to boycott the NFL. Doesn't plan on attending any games or supporting the NFL in any way. According to a quote from T.I., he said, "I think there's a violation of constitutional rights being implemented to minority players who choose to have a peaceful, silent protest. It's really like you want us to shut up and take what we got coming to us in our communities, and that's just not acceptable. And if that's what you think about us, why should we really spend our money and show our extreme support of your corporation?" That's his position. I respectfully disagree with T.I. First of all, there are no constitutional rights being violated, to my knowledge. Now, I defer to a lot of people. You know, I got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, you're talking to somebody who knows everyone from Sean Hannity and Mark Levin to Joe Madison, the Black Eagle, to Karen Hunter, to Michael Eric Dyson, and my brother Warren Ballantyne, who's listening to the show, or at least was in the first hour and what have you. I know all of these people, and they are far more knowledgeable than me, and I encourage all of y'all to go and listen to their shows because I'm far from an expert on these matters. I am aware of that. I'm also aware of the fact that civil rights is law. It protects all people, not just blacks and minorities, which is what Warren Ballantyne had said to me earlier. And I guess that's a way of making the point that white folks should get involved in some of the plights that exist that dramatically and detrimentally affect the African-American community. All of that's true. But number one, the NFL is a private industry. It's not public. Number two, these employers are reacting to what they believe to be is an assault on their bottom line. I personally have spoken to a couple of owners and several executives. I personally have communicated with these people. And I personally heard them say, quote, "We don't agree with Donald Trump. We believe that Donald Trump's a problem. We believe that he's on this vendetta tip, that he's trying to get the best of us. He's trying to exact vengeance against us because we would have let him into our good old boys club." That's what they said. He's trying to exact vengeance against us. He wouldn't let us into we wouldn't let him into our good old boys club when he wanted to be an owner of the Buffalo Bills in 2014. When he wanted to be an owner in the 80s, when he tried to sue the NFL, when he was an owner for the USFL, New Jersey Generals. Blah, 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 blah. Here's the point. The NFL owners never had a problem with Colin Kaepernick taking the knee. They didn't have a problem until the president said, fire all those sons of bees. And constituency followed. And all of a sudden, they saw their bottom line being affected, in their eyes anyway, because we have no statistical data that shows us their bottom line was dramatically compromised. The point is that as owners, they made a decision. We want to be about football. We don't want to be about all of that other stuff. And here's where T.I. runs into a problem. Listen to what he says here. It's really like you want us to shut up and take what we got coming to us in our communities. That's not true. The NFL owners, even though it was a pittance, because they should have given the Players Coalition more than $89 million to address concerns in the minority communities, nevertheless, the point of the matter is, if you want to be active in your various communities throughout this country, not only have the owners not stood in your way, but their mentality is, we're willing to do something to help. What we're saying is why upset the cash cow, which is the National Football League that has nothing to do with what you're protesting about. And I don't know how T.I. or anybody else can argue with that position. I got no issues with T.I. I applaud his activism. And I applaud his social consciousness. I get all of that. I get where he's coming from. I just don't think it's applicable here as it pertains to the NFL. Because the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, this bogus policy, this hypocritical policy that the NFL has invoked, they should be ashamed of themselves because they come across as flaming hypocrites. That is true. They also come across as very, very weak. That's true. But there's nothing about what they're proposing that's more egregious than what the NFL or what the NBA or Major League Baseball already has in place. T.I. never said anything about that. The NBA mandates you must stand for the national anthem. T.I. never spoke about that. Major League Baseball mandates that you must stand for the national anthem. T.I. never said anything about that. So if they mandate that you must stand for the national anthem, how is that different or worse than the NFL saying either stand for the national anthem when you're out on the field or stay in the locker room until the national anthem is finished? Which one's worse? Which one's worse? And if you're going to have a problem with the NFL, how do you not have a problem with the NBA? Or Major League Baseball? Or the National Hockey League? That's why this proposal by T.I. will gain no traction. It's not going to dent the NFL's popularity one bit. I promise y'all that. People going to watch the NFL. I promise you that. When you got pastors moving up their sermons in church an hour to 2 hours early for the sole express purpose of making sure that they get home in time for some football, you don't have a chance. You don't have a snowball's chance, and you know what? Not gonna create a dent at all. Not in my opinion. Just something to think about, ladies and gentlemen. Can't run from this stuff. We can act like we can. We can't run. Say ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. Surprise a friend or loved one today with a bouquet for 100 flowers. When you order a dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, you'll get another dozen absolutely free. So go to 100flowers.com/ESPN. 888-729-3776. 888-SAY-ESPN. Let's go to Joe. You're live with Stephen A. What's up, Joe?
Hey, how's it going, Steve?
I'm good. Talk to me.
I wanted to make a point. You made a valid point as far as athletes having an impact in society. I feel most impact, and they have the most wiggle room just because Adam Silver is so progressive, you could say. What else could an athlete do? I feel like maybe if Brown went to D.C. himself, maybe that would strike some type of chord. Maybe he would retire and go on to do political things, or or what else is it that an athlete can do? Because I feel like the NBA dominates as far as.
Well, there's always more that they can do as individuals. But, having the institution, the brand behind them, the NBA, the NFL, et cetera, does help. The NBA is far more progressive than the NFL. The NFL seems to engage in indentured servitude to some degree, as some people would say, in terms of how strict they are, how regimented they are. One guy just got his PhD or whatever and wanted to put MD on his jersey after his name, and they wouldn't even let him do that. See, those kind of things, you just look at the NFL and say, what's the matter with you? Where the NBA is a bit more lax, and I think that's more helpful. But it remains to be seen what more specifically that they can do or what the athletes are willing to do. Because when you look at today's athletes, everybody applauds them. And listen, I applaud their consciousness and their willingness to speak out. I truly do. But we act like they're at such incredible risk, and they're not. What exactly are you losing? If you're LeBron James or Chris Paul or anybody, your contract's guaranteed. What exactly are you losing? What exactly are you jeopardizing? That's why, you got folks out there talking about dog and pony shows all the time, giving pomp and circumstance to everything. Because why? Because at the real heart of the matter, there's but so much that's going to happen to you. And not only that, you usually take a position that practically everyone agrees with. No one standing in the face of true adversity and really taking it on the chin, maybe with the exception of Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed.
I just feel like Bron.
Have a nice day, man. You ain't ready to talk. You ain't ready. Will in Michigan, you're live with Stephen A. Go ahead.
Hey, Stephen A. Hey, I just was calling to say the NFL has every right to try to keep from alienating consumers because it's a business. You have every right to protest, but when you are working for the NFL or playing in the NFL, I get there's more privileges with that, and you're in the national spotlight. But bottom line is the NFL owners have every right to run it as a business. And as a business, you don't want to alienate consumers. And it doesn't matter if you take the left stand or the right stand.
Well, let me stop you. Let me stop you right there, Will. Here's where I agree with you. You are right in terms of their rights. Here's where I fall off the wagon with you. When the NFL owners are not honest enough to say that it's about business. Like when you admit that you're on the phone with President Trump and that he's influencing your thinking, you got a problem.
Exactly, because you're taking a right stance.
Because you're taking a stance that deviates from the bottom line. And now you're picking right and wrong, and you might be on the wrong side. You see what I'm saying? Your side, Will, is the right side, and that is it's business. And if we're in the business of football, we don't want something that's going to interfere with the business of football, as opposed to saying, well, I spoke to the president, and, I side with the president. No, now you're in deep waters.
Right, and then by them not taking that stand or not doing it sooner or not having it in place like the NBA did, you've alienated both sides.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly the point, Tyrone. Appreciate the call, buddy. Thank you so much. Don in L.A., you're live with Stephen A. What's up, Don?
Stephen A., great show, great dialogue.
Thank you.
This is the important thing. I'm so glad you mentioned Oscar Robertson because I'm a white guy. I would stand up with Oscar Robertson anytime. Because I know he's a serious man. He's going to have serious issues. But we forget where all this got started, Stephen A. It's like when Colin Kaepernick started all this, it was wearing the blue socks that showed cops as pigs. So he's lost me from the get. He's got nothing to say to me because he's coming from a bad position of hate. Because, if I were a white quarterback and I wore socks that had portrayed black people as something demeaning, some animal. Nobody would be saying, I guarantee you, nobody would be saying, oh, he's got freedom of speech. And that's just you not hear that. And you shouldn't. So the point is there's good people that want to talk to each other to solve problems, not just throw money at a failing system. I'm a Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass Republican. When's the last time you heard Frederick Douglass's name mentioned?
That's true.
Let's look at what some of the stuff he had to say, and you will sit down and say, damn, that was a hell of a man. Let's bring him into the conversation. But, Stephen A., we all want to make it better. But, I think the NFL guys are basically just paying people now. Oh, we'll donate some money to this cause. But what if the cause breaks up families instead of keeping them together. What if?
You know what you're saying, Don. You know what you're saying to me, Don. That everybody's wrong. You're saying that Colin Kaepernick was wrong. You know, the pigs on the socks depicting cops as pigs on his socks. You got the Fidel Castro T-shirt when he was in Miami. You know, knowing that he was an oppressive dictator and how a lot of Cubans feel about Fidel Castro. You know, there's a few things that Colin Kaepernick has done wrong, and there's no denying that. Even though ultimately his cause is something that, you know, I and many, many others from minority communities can certainly side with. But that doesn't mean that he did everything correctly, and it certainly doesn't mean he had a plan. In the case of owners and what have you, you've engaged in paid patriotism, which even a Senator, John McCain, admitted years ago when you took money from the Department of the Defense just to promote and market our armed forces, our armed services. And so when you look at it from that perspective, how you don't have a policy in place mandating folks stand for the national anthem, you sort of was asleep at the wheel if you were the National Football League, and now you're trying to engage in makeup duty. So you're wrong on that front. But then you add insult to injury, per se, when you admit that you're on the phone and you're being influenced by the very president who spoke against your players. It's all a mess.
Well, you're so right, Stephen A., because the problem is the extremes. We got guys like Kaepernick with his mentality on one extreme. We got guys with Trump and that just throw gasoline on the fire. That aren't, any jackass can kick down a barn, Stephen A. Takes a carpenter to build one. Let's all get together and be carpenters and start solving problems. I'll listen to you any day, brother.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate the call. Feel free to call back anytime, my man. Thank you. My boy Champ in Detroit always calls in. You're live with Stephen A. What's up, big boy? How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Talk to me. Go ahead.
The NBA MVP, and I look at it, I've been looking at this for quite some time now. I look at it as the Heisman Trophy Award. It's more of a hype machine. It has no substance. When you look at Major League Baseball, these guys didn't like Barry Bonds, but he was awarded 7 MVPs. It goes to show you that they paid attention to what was going on the field versus making things personal. When you look at the NBA writers with the MVP, I mean, it's no consistency. Obviously, if you have the best record in basketball and you consider one of the top 5 players, that has happened more than often since the media has taken over since 1981. Mm-hmm. But this notion, whenever LeBron James is not hosted the NBA championship or the MVP, it's like everybody else is no good. Can you answer that for me, please? I'm just curious about that.
I can't answer that. What I can tell you is this. In my personal belief, the MVP ain't just about what you do on the court. It's what you do to influence your team and its circumstances. And to me, Kyrie being gone, Dwayne Wade arriving, J.R. Smith feeling alienated and ultimately regressing to an alarming level of unproductivity, Isaiah Thomas and Crowder and how they were unable to fit in, the roller coaster ride that Cleveland was under this year. Yes, it was phenomenal that they got to the finals. And yes, LeBron James deserves credit for that. But this is a regular season award, and we all know how suspect their regular season was. And that doesn't compare to the kind of season James Harden had and Houston had. And that's where I'm coming from with that.
Right. I don't want to stay on that long. And I never really had these type of conversations in the public setting, but I wanted to say this. It's been on my heart for quite some time about the political stances that's been taking place over the last several years. And what Oscar Robertson said last night, I respect his position, and I'm not going to go against it, but this is what I would like to say to the national audience. Chris Paul, the NBA Players Association president, Donald Sterling made some egregious comments in the private setting, and they came out the next night and they flipped their jerseys. And I laughed. As a young black man in this country, I said Chris Paul was afraid to take a stance. He was afraid of what Doc Rivers or the general manager or anybody. That was a moment. That was a moment where Chris Paul could have stood tall as a true leader and said, you know what? We will not play basketball today. We are going to disrupt the NBA playoffs because this is it's unacceptable in the United States of America. And you know what? He missed the boat.
Wait a minute. Chris Paul was working behind the scenes. He was threatening exactly what you just mentioned. And as a result, Adam Silver came out and banned Donald Sterling for life and with the owners forced the sale of the Los Angeles Clippers. So to
Can
me,
I please finish?
I'm just asking a question. What is the problem if that's what ultimately went down?
I'm with you. It's not a problem. I'm talking about taking a political stance versus taking a stand. When Muhammad Ali said, no, I will not do this, he took a stance. He sacrificed. Same with LeBron James, Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony at the ESPYs. I love these guys. They're terrific basketball players. They do great in the community. But when we talk about taking a stance, when you look at, you want white people to get behind you. What happened to LeBron James with Tamir Rice? Can you imagine the day that happened in Cleveland, Ohio? Had LeBron said before the beginning of the game, when they made the announcement for him to come to start lineup, he sat down, and all the reporters were like, what's going on? I would not play basketball.
I see.
So they do it a full.
So what you're saying is that rather than working diplomatically and quietly to get things done, what's required at times is players in these high-profile, very influential professional athletes taking a public stance, because that public stance will make change for the better more profound than anything else they do behind the scenes. Is that basically what you're saying?
I'm going to sum it up with this. He can tweet the president and call the president a bum. So if you can call the United States of America president a bum, you can take a stance. I rest my case.
Okay. Appreciate the call. Thanks a lot. Y'all heard what Champ had to say. Very, very valid points, I might add. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. Basically, listen to what he's saying. He's talking about, instead of working behind the scenes diplomatically, as effective as Chris Paul and LeBron James and others were, imagine if they had refused to play a game. Imagine if they had taken the kind of stance pertaining to those issues and how it would have resonated. Rather than just the sale of the Los Angeles Clippers, rather than Donald Sterling being just exiled as an owner, imagine what it would have done from a societal perspective if the players had made the sacrifice of not playing a game at all just to make their point more profound. It clearly wasn't necessary, but you do have some people that think like that, and Oscar Robertson certainly appears to be one of those people. You just never know. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. More of the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio with your calls in a minute.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
L.A., you're live with Stephen A. Talk to me.
What's up, Stephen A., man? I want to tell you why I believe T.I. has it exactly right.
Okay, please.
So, first on this constitutional rights issue, due process is a constitutional right.
Okay.
And so if I'm denied due process because you mistakenly thought I was a danger to you and you shot me unarmed, I didn't get my due process.
Well, whoa. See, here's why I don't like these arguments. Let me ask you this question, and just stay with me for a second, because I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I'm hoping you can convince me, because I would love for T.I. to be right. But are you a lawyer?
I am not.
Okay, here's my problem with this. I'm in no position. I'm not qualified to argue with you about due process, but I was under the impression that due process comes into play when you've been arrested. Like they reading you your rights and they're exposing you to due process. I don't think that's applicable in a world of business to your employer.
Well, hold on. But see, I'm not at that point yet. I'm simply saying that when I hear T.I. say we're denied our due process, he's talking about the collective we. Hey, man, there are citizens that are being denied due process.
Okay. All right. That's fair. But what does that have to do with this when he talks about the NFL?
To me, it's all linked. So what happens is, hey, citizens are being denied their due process. You have a football player who, not breaking any rules, decides that he wants to silently protest that.
Go ahead. Keep going.
The right to peaceful protest
Keep
is
going.
also
Keep going.
A constitutional right.
Keep going.
The NFL then decides to blackball this particular player.
Okay.
And their reasoning for doing it is, hey, man, this guy is impacting our bottom line.
Okay.
We believe that the consumers of our products don't appreciate this type of protest, this guy is blackballed.
Okay.
All T.I. is now saying is, oh, consumerism is the language you speak. Well, then fine. As a consumer, we're now going to choose to speak your language. We are going to collectively boycott your product.
Stop right there. Stop right there. First of all, and I love what you said. First of all, let me tell you this. I disagree with you. But in the same breath that I disagree with you, L.A., I applaud you. Your points are valid. I get where you're coming from. I appreciate your consciousness with it, brother. I got no issues, all right? But let's have a conversation real quick. Here's where your problem runs into a roadblock. In any line of work, of business, I'm not talking about federal employees. I'm not talking about government employees. I'm talking about in private industries, in the private sector, they get to modify those rules and regulations. Our society allows that. That's number one. Number two, in the world of professional sports, there is something called the collective bargaining agreement. And whereas it did not stipulate the standing or the kneeling for the national anthem in the collective bargaining agreement, it never addressed that issue. You also know, you know what else it didn't address, L.A.? Are you ready for this?
Yes.
It didn't address the powers of the commissioner and the owner, other than to say they can operate with relative impunity. Why did Tom Brady get suspended for 4 games for deflated footballs? Why is it that Jameis Winston is about to get suspended for 3 games or so because of the incident with an Uber driver when he was never arrested? He was never indicted. How about Ben Roethlisberger serving for 4 game suspension and being denied his check and 4 games pay because of an accusation? You see what I'm saying? In other words, there are rules that take place in the world of professional sports, L.A., that aren't applicable to us as citizens, government employees, etc. We don't have a collective bargaining agreement.
That's right.
So what I'm saying to you is that those rules, in other words, why is it that, you know how people get, you've seen it because I'm sure you've listened to me, LA, before, and I appreciate the support, my brother. How many times have you heard about me talking about how somebody was against me because they felt like I was against the players during collective bargaining and negotiations when I never was against them? When all I said was, this is the reality of your leverage. At the end of the day, you're going to lose. How many times did you hear me on the air a year ago and beyond? Tom Brady going to serve those 4 games. How many times did I say that, LA? No matter what. No evidence. The report came out. There was holes everywhere. You could have drove a truck through those holes in the NFL argument. And he appealed and appealed and appealed. And what did I say, LA? He going to serve those 4 games.
And he even recently said to Oprah he got sick of fighting.
That's right. And because guess what? But no. You stopped short of what he said, LA. Tell the truth. What else did he say? He said, quote, because I couldn't win. Remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
Because of the collective bargaining agreement. So you have to understand that it is perfectly within the purview of the NFL to institute a law. No matter how ridiculous and hypocritical it is, it's perfectly within their right to say, we've changed this rule. This is what the rule going to be now.
But listen, see, I don't hear T.I.'s statements as him saying, I'm boycotting because you put this rule in for the anthem.
No, he's not saying that.
If that was the case,
he's saying,
if that were the case, he would have boycotted.
No. No, you're right, Ellie. He's not saying that. But what he's saying is the result of the ruling is what he is in opposition of. And I'm saying, but it isn't doing what he says it's doing. Because the players signed on for it. That's why. Why do you think the Players Association is sitting there complaining right now about how the NFL owners didn't consult with them before instituting this new rule?
But listen, I think what he's really saying is, NFL, if you want to make the issue about your bottom line, we're now going to go ahead and speak your language. I think it's that simple.
Fine, L.A. Well, let me ask you this question because I got to get to other callers, all right? I want a clear, simple answer from you. You think it's going to work? My brother.
That's good, Stephen.
My brother.
Hey,
my
man,
brother.
Look, hey, listen, I think I have the same skepticism that a lot of people had when they were going to boycott the buses in Montgomery.
Come on now.
And I hope everybody will stay strong.
Come on now. Come on, bro. You know better than that. And you know that ain't going to be the case because this ain't the cause for that. If Colin Kaepernick were boycotting the NFL, you would have a point. But his argument wasn't against the NFL. And on Sunday afternoons, people are going to remember that. They ain't going nowhere, bro. But call me back another day because I got love for you. Thanks a lot for calling, bro. I really appreciate it. Anita in New York, you're live with Stephen A. Good afternoon, Anita. How are you?
Hi, Stephen A. I'm so excited to be on the show.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm excited to have you. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
So I was just listening about your comment about why you think that LeBron doesn't deserve MVP because, you know, obviously it's not based off the postseason, which makes sense. But the part about how, like, you know, he should be blamed for, like, the discord that was going on between him and his teammates and, like, Kyrie Irving leaving, Harrison being disengaged. I kind of feel like it's unfair to blame only him for that because it's like, how do you really know that Kyrie left because of him?
Well, hold on, Anita. First of all, Kyrie came on my show and basically explained some of those things. A. B. I never said it was only LeBron. Of course, Dan Gilbert had something to do with it. Other players had something to do with it. But in the end, the only reason why we're talking about LeBron is because he's the one that was up for MVP against Harden. If there were other people up for MVP against Harden on the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'd have brought them up too. But that's not who it was. It was just LeBron. So because LeBron is the only viable candidate to go up against James Harden for league MVP along with Anthony Davis, that's the only reason I brought up LeBron. Dan Gilbert ain't running for wasn't playing for league MVP honors against James Harden. That's why. Yeah. That's why you heard LeBron's name come up only.
Okay, I get it.
Okay.
I was just saying because I watched that interview that you had with him on First Take, and he seemed really cryptic with all of the answers. But I was just assuming maybe it's just that he wants to be the star of his own team.
That too.
But
that was a part of it. That was absolutely a part of it, and you're absolutely right about that, Anita. That is absolutely correct. But there was more to it than that, and LeBron knows it. But Anita, I have to run. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the call. Appreciate the love. Thank you so much. Before I go to break, let me say this. I want to give a special props to Carmelo Anthony and Lala Anthony, his lovely wife, who, by the way, you know she's on that show Power that debuts this Sunday night on Stars Network. Amari Hardwick and the crew, 50 Cent and the crew. Power, don't miss it. That and Billions are my two favorite shows, but I digress. In all seriousness, I want to give props to LeBron James and Lala Anthony. There was an Hispanic kid in the Bronx that was brutally murdered by gang members. Apparently, they murdered him with a machete. Several of them. I think there's been like 6 arrests thus far. I think a 7th came this morning or was on the way. I don't know the whole story. Well, obviously, it's a heinous act, heinous crime. Definitely law enforcement officials. It has their attention. They're doing everything they can about this. But it was a case of mistaken identity. A little innocent kid was mistaken as somebody else that they were after. And they brutally murdered him. This kid. Wrong identity. Our hearts go out to his family. Hundreds of people packed the Bronx and to attend his funeral, his viewing. Carmelo Anthony and his wife Lala were 2 of those people. Major props to them for being there. I think it's a good thing that they were there. It's the right thing to do. If I was in New York City, I would have shown up, to be honest with you. What a tragedy. Very, very unfortunate, very incredibly sad. And also speaks to the level of violence that's existing out there and how we've got to come together and do something about that just as much as anything else. 888-SAY ESPN's the number to call up. Back with your calls to close out the show in a minute with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Back to the phones we go, right here on Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio. Marvin in Cincinnati, talk to me.
How you doing, Stephen? I just want
I'm all
to
right.
ask you a question and see what you got to say about it.
Go ahead.
I was under the impression that the NFL was getting a check for them guys from the military to stand for the national anthem.
Department of Defense, but it wasn't to stand for the national anthem. It was to promote patriotism, and the NFL inexplicably never mandated they stand for the national anthem. They strongly suggested and encouraged to use their words, but they never mandated it like the NBA or Major League Baseball.
Do you think they didn't do that because they wanted to keep the money?
No, because the other leagues were getting money from the Department of Defense as well, and they mandated it, so it was no problem.
Okay, and I got another quick subject about basketball.
Go ahead, real quick.
I love Kevin Durant. I think he's the best player in the world. And I would like to say this about all the haters keep saying because he left Oklahoma that he started something and he went to a team they said, and I know that's the way you kind of feel too. But I want to say this. I believe that started when Harden left OKC. And then I believe it's happened before when Moses left and went to Philly to play with Dr. J. That had to be number one and number two or three player.
Let's talk about that another day because I got to get ready to go. Let's talk about that another day when I got more time, but I appreciate the call. Let's go to Eric in Michigan. You're live with Stephen A. Go ahead, Eric.
Hey, Stephen A. Love the show.
Thank you.
I got a question. I figure you're the man to ask.
Go ahead.
The NFL is concerned about their bottom line running as a business as well as they should be. The question I have, though, is how many prospective fans in society are the NFL alienating because of their current policies, because of the distractions and the controversy in the news, not only about the anthem, but who's talking to who's listening to who. Because I don't know the numbers, and it seems if the NFL is that concerned about their bottom line, they would be more concerned about trying to attract new fans.
Well, listen, I do think they're making a concerted effort to do that. Think about the games that take place in London. That's obviously an effort to globalize their brand to some degree. And in this country, when it comes to football, I think they're very, very much interested in institutional control and exercising the level of control that they think the growing public wants when it pertains to the modern day athlete. The freedom that the NBA players have, the NFL would never allow its players to have. But again, I can get into that a little bit more, but not nearly as much time to get into it. I got to get on out of here. Interesting tidbit that I'm going to touch on tomorrow. Magic Johnson gave himself a 2-summer deadline. Said if in 2 summers, if he doesn't turn the Lakers around, she won't have to fire him. He'll quit. That's what Magic Johnson said. We'll talk about that tomorrow and then some. Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, signing off until 22 hours from now. Peace and love.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.